It's interesting. I am in the middle. It's on BookTube. There's some people who are doing a mental health May, and as I finish chapter 13 of book 2 of the House of Mrth, I'm like, oh, this is definitely a mental health book. A mental health book which isn't about curing you or comforting you, but it's an amazing portrayal of a woman cast out of her society for her own pride, for her own capriciousness, her own kind of want, but resting with her um, as her pride and her sense of worth, her goodness, in a way, isolate her and send her deeper and deeper into loneliness. Um, and you can almost see there being a point there like, oh, maybe she's going to find a way when she meets Nettie Struthers, this woman that she helped, in a little spasmodic, oh, here's some money. I'm not carelessly, I'm giving you money. It's Gus Trenner's money to help this woman who she goes, gets healthy. Nettie Struthers goes, gets healthy in a sanatorium, comes back and marries a man, has a child, and has forged a little life for herself. Um, and it's a life sustained, it's a meager, tenuous life, but it's sustained by she loves her child, she loves her husband. They've created a family, and Lily Bart, for all her beauty and everything there, doesn't have that. She refused the love of Lawrence, Lawrence Selden, not George, Lawrence Selden, not Harry Selden, Lawrence Selden, 3 times. And the first 2 times, he came back for the third, but he was finally disillusioned by her. Unlike Nettie Struthers fellow, who was like, he knew who she was, that she was kind of with some other guy, but he believed in her in a way. I mean, there's some bullshit kind of stuff going on here as well, and like how the love of a good man could save you or stuff like that. Um, versus the idea that self-reliance. But I mean, there's also just a sort of a thing of where supported by a community, whether you get that from a love relationship or whether you get that from friendships or family. She has no family. She has no friends or friends that she wants to be with. Like Gertie Farish would still be her friend. Um, and it's like, it's the book so beautifully captures her loneliness. Um, it was as though a great blaze of electric light had been turned on in her head, and her poor little anguished self shrank and cowered in it without knowing where to take refuge. But the terrible silence and emptiness seemed to symbolize her future. She felt as though the house, the street, the world were all empty, and she alone left sentient in a lifeless universe. Um, Such a vision of solitary life had never before come to Lily. She had a premonition uh, of of it in the blind motions of her mating instinct, but they had been checked by the disintegrating influences of the life about her. All the men and women she knew were like atoms whirling away from each other in some wild centrifugal dance. Her first glimpse of the continuity of life had come to her that evening in Nettie Struthers' kitchen. Nettie Struther being this poor little working girl, as it's saying, had the poor little working girl who had found strength to gather up the fragments of her life and build herself a shelter with them, seemed to Lily to have reached the central truth of existence. It was a meager enough life, on the grim edge of poverty, with scant margin for possibilities of sickness or mischance, but it had the frail, audacious permanence of a bird's nest built on the edge of a cliff, a mere wisp of leaves and straw, yet so put together that the lives entrusted to it may hang safely over the abyss. And I mean, we do go into taking a man also to help that, but you know, but there was something more miserable still. It was the clutch of solitude at her heart, the sense of being swept like a stray uprooted growth down the heedless current of the years. That was the feeling which possessed her now, the feeling of being something rootless and ephemeral, mere spindrift of the whirling surface of existence, without anything to which the poor little tentacles of self could cling before the awful flood submerged them. And that's kind of how life can feel sometimes. The awful flood. Um, I mean, it can also feel like a lot of other things, but I think this is really capturing that that moment. Um, which, if you're very lucky, you're lucky. You get through to the other side, and you realize there's another side. Um, she desperately wants to sleep. She wants oblivion, and she ups the dose well past what it should be, and she lays down to sleep, and suddenly she's got Nettie Struthers' baby, um, which is, yeah. She stirred once and turned, like, she's got this, like, I'm happy because I'm drugged. Um, and she's like happy, and she suddenly understood why she did not feel herself alone. It was odd, but Nettie Struthers' child was lying on her arm. She felt the pressure of its little head against her shoulder. She did not know how it had come there, but she felt no great surprise at the fact, only a gentle, penetrating thrill of warmth and pleasure. And that is so sad. It's so sad, that this most alone woman has this vision, this warmth sensation, really, of cradling a baby in a bed. That continuity, that kind of life, of, like, getting together with someone and producing life. I imagine, um, must that comfort that kind of gives people of the awful flood of existence, the endless centrifugal dance of atoms being hurled apart, of lifeless, empty universe. It's like, no, here is life here. Uh, and she thinks that there's something she must tell Selden, some world she'd found that should make life clear between them. She tried to repeat the word, which lingered vague and luminous on the far edge of thought. She was afraid of not remembering when she woke. I mean, it's like it's one of these, like, oh, everything's solved. There's a switch, and it's like a switch that's sort of just out of reach for her. Um, and then there's what I think is the final thing. She struggled faintly against it, feeling that she ought to keep awake and count the baby. But even this feeling was gradually lost in an indistinct sense of drowsy peace, through which, of a sudden, a dark flash of loneliness and terror tore its way. She started up again, cold and trembling with the shock. For a moment she seemed to have lost her hold of the child. But no, she was mistaken. The tender pressure of its body was still close to hers. The recovered warmth flowed through her once more, and she yielded to it, sank into it, and slept. And a part of it is her brain having one moment of, like, oh shit, I'm gonna die, and then just succumbing to the drugs. Um, but also just being one moment of warmth and happiness and peace before oblivion, before the ultimate oblivion happens. And she sinks into it and sleeps. Because I think she's dead now. I think she is dead. I think the next chapter, which is 15 minutes long, is the final chapter. I think that is her dead, which I think about the beginning of the novel now. The beginning of the novel had a weird POV to start off with. It didn't start off with her POV. It started off with people seeing her from the outside, the materialistic, the the, the gorgeousness of this woman at the beginning of this novel. Uh, and I wonder how she's going to be viewed as in death. Is she as beautiful as a corpse? That's what I wonder, if that's where we're going, or if there'll be more than that. Yeah. All right. I rambled there for a while, but yeah, this is not a bad entry for Mental Health Month, even though it's not a book I would ever recommend someone who is not feeling up to it. But basically, something to remind you when you're outside of that, what it feels like to be inside that, because it's really doing that well. What it is to be in that bad place, feeling the awful flood, the empty solitude of the world, just the feeling outside of everything. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave it there.